But anyways, happy thoughts. We're going to college now, and we're going to be talking about should college players really be going away from the one and done. I'm almost going to say one and one. The one and done here. Should they be going away from the one and done of, all right, I'm going to go play my 1 year in college, then I'm going to go to the NBA? Because we've seen this year that the kind of effect on rookies, or the lack of effect that the rookies have had on the NBA game, and really the one rookie that is playing out of his mind is Joel Embiid, and the other one that's playing well is Saric, who I believe was drafted 2 years ago, and he was more of a draft and stash, and he was a draft and stash, and we haven't seen the guys like Brandon Ingram because he's been injured a little bit, but isn't getting that many minutes.
Ingram's just not, they're holding him back, or he's holding himself back.
Yeah, we saw Ben Simmons get injured as well, so he hasn't been really playing. Jaylen Brown's been playing limited minutes. Should college players be more worried of the one and done? Because we've seen the effect that waiting has had on Joel Embiid.
I think that it's an interesting case because Joel Embiid is a completely different man than he was when he was drafted. When he was drafted, he was
a boy.
Now
he's a man.
There you go. I want to go It's Always Sunny with you right now, but puberty. I can't. I'm gonna keep it positive. Look, he was skin and bones. He was skin and bones, and like he's put on probably like 50 pounds of muscle. The dude is insanely jacked now, and if he came in the league how he was as a rookie, he would have got pushed around by everybody. There's no way his body wasn't able to sustain that kind of daily beating, and there's no way that he would have been as successful as he is now. But looking at the progression of his growth and looking at these one and done players hit the NBA and don't see that immediate success, we see Brandon Ingram, who looks like a skinnier version of KD, which is scary to think about because that's like the nickname Slim Reaper already. Come on, like dude has nothing on him. So I'm concerned about the health because I think that when you see the multiple year players come in the league, they do a little better off the bat. You know why? Because they have a fully developed body. They have a body that can withstand the beating of the NBA. They can go day to day. They can do back-to-backs without worrying because they're already built. So I think a lot of it comes down to that. I'm not even touching on the mental. It's just purely physical at this point. They know their game, and I think that helps too because you're not trying to go out there and be like, I'm everything. I'm an all-star. I'm fantastic. You're like, no, I'm a developed player. I know where I'm at. Yeah, there's room to improve still, but it's not that big level over your head.
And one thing I want to throw out here is I'm looking at the minutes per game for qualified rookies. Top 10, you have Sarge, who was a draft and stash. You have Andrew Harrison from Kentucky, who played a lot of time in Kentucky. You have Joel Embiid, who obviously we've been talking about. Brandon Ingram, a true rookie. Sabonis, waited 2 years in Gonzaga. You had Buddy Hield, obviously, was a 4-year senior at Oklahoma. Malcolm Brogdon played multiple years at Virginia. Chris Dunn, multiple years at Providence. Jamal Murray, one and done, like Mr. Brandon Ingram. And then also Wade Baldwin, who waited years in Vanderbilt, I believe, as a sophomore. So we have two true rookies in the top 10 of minutes per game for rookies that are really playing. I mean, we were not seeing the effect of the rookies here. And you brought up Brandon Ingram. I mean, is health like a true concern for most of these rookies?
It's one of the things where I love how you said, he's a boy. Because, coming out of college, they're still boys. They're not men. And I know that one of the big things is, if they go to the NBA, they can get around the clock train. They get the NBA trainers with the NBA weight rooms that are better than schools have. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's good. But doesn't that kind of put your team at a disadvantage that, hey, we're going to draft a guy, but we got to wait for him to basically use our weight rooms and build up. I'm looking just at last year's draft, and the big thing that we need with the one and done, I think it needs to be not amended, but our philosophy as a culture needs to change. Because if you are a LeBron James, if you are a Kobe Bryant, if you are I'm even going to throw Karl Anthony Towns from last year, because Karl Anthony Towns went number 1 overall, and he actually looked like, yes, this kid can play in the NBA. If you are a talent like that, then fine, cool, go to the NBA after 1 year. But I think the biggest problem is that these kids, it's not a fact of, like Dave was saying, with the, I'm too big for myself. They don't have the ego like that.
No, some do,
but it's more of the, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to the NBA than go to school because I'm going to get that paycheck so I can help my mom. I can help my dad. How many stories do we hear about that year after year? Football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is.
Peyton Barber obviously sticking out from Auburn this year in the NFL.
And the thing that I think of is like D'Angelo Russell. He was a guy who, he came in and his was a little different because he came into a Kobe team that was on the last tour of Kobe, also had the Tank Commander. And Jahlil Okafor, he's another freshman where it's like, hasn't really performed like we thought he would. Even look at Justice Winslow, 10th pick overall, a guy who I had overhyped. And the big thing that I think needs to happen with this is, like I said, the culture change needs to happen to where we need to make it to where college players don't feel like they have to go to the NBA just to get a paycheck to help out mom, to help out dad, to help out the family members at home. And the one thing I draw back to, and of course this is going to be me drawing from my own personal experience, the student athlete kind of mantra that they put out there, worst thing for college sports, because you can't pay him. He's a student athlete. But I worked at my radio station in college and I got paid. I got paid for what was it, $500 a semester. Oh, I can get paid because I'm not an athlete, but this guy can't because he's an athlete? That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and one thing too with going in back to a little bit about the minutes too, because obviously pay comes into a lot of it, because a lot of these kids they do come from rough situations, and basketball is their escape, and that's what they look for to get them out of these rough situations, so they can help their family get out of these rough situations, and that's one thing that really sticks out for these players, is that this is a way that I can escape. This is a way that, one, I can just start making money in general too, because I'm not making money here, and I can play the same exact game and get a lot more money
for
a lot quicker.
Basketball.
College is not actually for learning; it's a stepping stone to get paid.
Yeah, and kids can always go back to college too. That's the thing, is these kids are like, all right, well, if I do want to get into broadcasting, I can just go back and I can just get that degree then, and then ESPN will pick me up because I have NBA experience and I have this degree from Duke. I'm just using Brandon Ingram as an experience, but Brandon Ingram, he goes to Duke, he's able to go back to Duke because he's like, hey, I played for you guys there, and he has a little bit of a relationship there. Now
Plus he got the NBA paycheck too.
Yeah, and now he's got a broadcast. He's got the ability to pay for it. He's got the broadcasting degree from Duke. He's got experience in the NBA. These kids would be stupid not to go. And I think obviously the thing that should come from is either compensation for these NBA or for these college players, or an actual just cutoff where you have to say, all right, you need to play 2 years. Or extend the play.
I think 2 years would be the best, because I think it's by that, after that second year into that third year, that's where we really see, like, okay, this guy has really come into his own. Unless he's like a LeBron James
or a Karl Anthony Towns,
who like came out of, well, I wouldn't put Karl Anthony Towns on the level of LBJ.
Maybe Anthony Davis.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where if you're generationally like, okay, sure, but then you can't say, oh, well, you can go, but you can't.
Right.
You're good enough, but you're not.
I do like how we're using LeBron James as an experience, even though he skipped college.
It's one of
that's the point.
That's the thing. Yeah. That was the rule then. And I would even say if another LeBron James came around, and he can come, if you can come right out of high school, why not? But it's one of those things where not everyone can do that.
And one thing looking at last year, too, is maybe the rookies just aren't good enough, and maybe the rookies are just completely different here. Because looking at last year, if you take the most minutes from the true freshmen doing one and done, it's Brandon Ingram playing 22 minutes. You compare that to last year, looking at what these rookies were doing. Karl Anthony Towns was playing 32 minutes a game. Moutier was playing 30. If you slide in where Brandon Ingram is now, he'd be 10th right now, below Miles Turner, who is averaging 22 minutes per game. Brandon Ingram is pretty much barely making that top 10 there. And that's one thing, is that these guys aren't making significant impacts, and I don't know if that's because of their minutes, or I don't know if it's because of their actual talent.
I think part of it is fit on the team, too. That Lakers team is a very interesting team, the way they built up as a shooting core.
And they're not rushing anything.
And they're not, and they have no need to. So I think they can afford to slow roll him. The thing that I'm thinking is that, look, if we have a situation where we have to draft off of pure, like, hey, this guy has potential to be amazing, but we've seen him play 30 games, and you have to make a decision off of 30 games, that 1 year of progress, and just hope that you guys kill it, we see a lot of these bad cases where, look, I'm looking at the Suns right now, and they've got 2 guys they drafted in the first round, between Dragon Bender and
Marquise
Chris, where it's like, look, both these guys, I mean, Bender thankfully overseas, so you got a little bit more sight, but Chris is like, yeah, we watched him play for a year. He looked good. Great.
Looked athletic.
Yeah, he looked athletic. Literally, his game is undeveloped. Like we talk about it a lot. He was one of the most raw prospects beyond Jaylen Brown, and it's hard because the NBA teams then suffer for the poor product because they don't get a good chance to evaluate talent.
And the one thing I'm going to mention is, Sean, before we hit the record button, we were kind of thinking like, oh, well, what kind of rookies are right now performing well? And you threw out the name, you're like, it was kind of as a joke, but it was Yogi Ferrell. And the thing I look at that is, has he been playing bad? Not terrible. Yeah, he's on the Nets. They're terrible overall.
He's had to step up.
But he's a guy where, how many years did he play in Indiana? More than one. Forever in Indiana. Came out as and that is a veteran college player coming out. And right now, he's the one that we say, oh yeah, I guess he's having the best season right now.
At least putting up points wise.
A guy that I was hyping in the preseason for the Cavaliers, Kay Felder, wasn't a freshman.
But also with Kay is that he went to a team in Cleveland that doesn't need him right now.
I mean, fit matters a lot when it talks to NBA teams. My boy Sabonis, dude. Sabonis landed in a city where he needs to stand behind a 3-point line and make smart decisions. Guess what? He's a fantastic ball handler too. He gets to show that off a little, but he's built up that game. He didn't come in with a fantastic shot. He didn't come in with great hands. It took time in college to build that, and I think that's what we're seeing is that 2-year mark. I don't want to say 3 because 3 seems extreme, but after 2 years, you have a better idea of their game. Look, after 2 years, guess what? Your favorite boy, Wooden Award winner, Buddy Hield, wouldn't have been shit. He wouldn't have got drafted after 2 years.
No, because the whole thing with Buddy Hield that they made a huge deal about at the end of last season was he had to basically retool his shot. He was shooting with the wrong hand. And the one thing with Sabonis is isn't
that ridiculous to think? He's been playing basketball his whole life.
There's a couple guys who have done it though.
I know, but it's crazy.
Phenomenal. Anyways. But with Sabonis, he was a guy. He was with Gonzaga for a couple years. He didn't just play and then
Dad
boom,
also
he's
a former
out of
NBA
there.
player too.
Yeah. But I mean, it's one of those things where, look at Steph Curry. He was a guy that was at Davidson a couple of years before he came out.
Dad also an NBA player.
I'm not saying, well, even Klay Thompson too. Dad's an NBA player. Maybe you just got to be a son of an NBA player or a WNBA player. But the thing that I'm not trying to say you have to stay this many years to be successful, because everybody is different. All 3 of us are different in every single way. It's just not everybody can play 1 year of college and then transition right to the NBA.
Yeah, not everybody has that developed talent already. So, it might be punishing to some people, but for a lot of people, it's the better route. But like we said, we need that NBA cooperation with the NCAA in order to ensure, because I don't want to see somebody lose out on their livelihood because they had an injury. They busted an ACL in college because you forced them to stay another year.
And Greg Oden, too. You could even say him coming out early and then, obviously this isn't anything really.
Doomed to fail, but
he comes in and now he's labeled as a bust, but he made the right choice, because if any of his injuries happen in college, he's screwed. He doesn't get a paycheck at all. So then Greg Oden has to go, back to school. He has to go find some insurance job or something, and we don't know what happens to Greg Oden, but at least Greg Oden does get an NBA contract, and he does get some compensation, and that's something
with 2 of them.
too. But real quick, the final thing I want to mention on is just imagine if Joel Embiid is currently in college. Current Joel Embiid.
The level of domination is insane.
On that Kansas team that I saw go up against Duke,
that's the Joel Embiid show.
Yeah.
Sorry, Josh Jackson. That's the Joel Embiid show.
But then add Josh Jackson to that team.
You think anyone else is touching that ball besides Joel Embiid?
Yeah, Embiid's dropping like 50 and a
monster who's loaded.
He's like 7'2".
Embiid might have to take a water break for a minute every now and then.
I don't know about that.
He's killing himself on this minutes restriction. He's going nuts on the bench.
Can I throw out one interesting thing?
Yeah, this is the final thing. Yeah, this is the final thing.
I want to go back 2003 draft class. Let's say LeBron went to college for the one and done rule. And I thought about this earlier this week.
So if the rule was adjusted.
If the rule was in place and he couldn't come out of high school, LeBron would have went to college. That means coming out that 2003 draft, if he didn't come out that year and had to be in college for the year, Carmelo Anthony would have been in Cleveland. Milicic would have still been with the Pistons.
Darko.
Chris Bosh would have went to Denver, and D Wade would have went to Toronto, and then Chris Kaman would have been.
Well, you don't know that, but I mean,
if just moving everyone up,
also that
because Melo would have been the number one pick.
That also
LeBron wasn't there.
That also means LeBron's going to Orlando, and then Dwight Howard is going to Milwaukee.
The repercussions are kind of crazy.
Because that means then Milwaukee's taking him number one overall. Besides Andrew Bogut, and maybe the Orlando Magic survives without with Tracy McGrady and LeBron James. Heard those guys were pretty good.
Good God.
Anyways, that's gonna wrap up this episode of the Fast Break. We're really what we're saying is there needs to be some compensation so kids are not feeling like they're forced to go away from college because
it's a win all around too. I mean,
really.
it makes the game better, makes the product better, makes everyone's lives easier. And look, then we get better competition. NCAA builds dynasties again.
Seriously,
we see the NBA get better draft picks. We don't draft off of he's a raw athlete who maybe can learn how to shoot a ball.
Yeah, and that's something that's crazy to think that Karl Anthony Towns could still be playing on Kentucky right now. And could you imagine that team? Could you imagine Joel Embiid on Kansas or Ben Simmons still on LSU? Crazy to think of what's happening. I'm thinking at least, Boogie Cousins isn't getting traded. Dave's saying it's gonna happen. Ricky's saying it's gonna happen. And we also talked best teams in the East, but also that's gonna wrap up. But also, anyways, that's gonna wrap up this episode of the Fast Break Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Anderson. Thank you, Dave, for joining us. Thank you, Ricky, for joining us as always. Thank you for watching.
Oh yeah, there's a camera here.
Don't forget to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast if you want to see more video podcasts like this, and also don't forget to check out Twitter. Don't forget to check out Facebook and all of that good stuff. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. For Dave, for Ricky, I'm Sean. We'll see you next time.
For listening to this MVP podcast, follow us on Twitter @MostValuablePod for more great podcasts.